So without further ado, I will introduce our first session, and that is around designing breeding programs. So over a series of presentations, we will be discussing a program that is very close to my own heart, and that is MateSel, how it's being used by producers, service providers, and across industries. This first presentation will be delivered by Chloe Bunter and Marnie Hodge. Chloe is the Merino Select Development Officer in the sheep genetics team. Another Central West representative, Chloe grew up in Gilgandra in New South Wales. She's been with sheep genetics for a year and a half now, following her graduation from the University of New England with a Bachelor of Rural Science. We also have Marnie presenting in this session. Marnie is our Land Plan Development Officer and joined the team last year. Marnie is also currently completing postgraduate studies through Charles Sturt University in estimating the genetic parameters of ram semen traits and had previously worked for a sheep artificial breeding facility in Dubbo. Chloe and Marnie's job this morning will be around setting the scene of what MateSel is and highlighting how MateSel is delivered to sheep genetics breeders and how these breeders are using this tool to manage genetic gain and diversity in their breeding programs. I'll hand over now to Chloe and Marnie.
As part of sheep genetics, we have access to an amazing toolkit available to breeders to help make selection decisions, and MateSel is one of those tools within that toolkit. So today, Marnie and I are going to go through opportunities that we have as sheep genetics clients to access this tool, as well as ways we can use it and how it is currently being used by sheep genetics clients. So we're going to cover how MateSel is being used and when it's being used within the breeding program. First up, to get us all going for this morning, we are going to have a bit of a Slido question just to see and gauge a bit around the room how we're using MateSel. So first, yes, I'm running it myself as a breeder. Yes, I'm running with it through a service provider who does it for others. Yes, I'm a service provider myself, or no, I'm not using it at this stage. So if you'd all like to log on to Slido and just answer which one is the appropriate one for you. Very good. So as we can see these answers coming in, we've got a bit of a strong correlation here. Couple more still to come through. Right. So if we look at those three that say, yes, I am running it either yourself as a breeder, through a service provider, or you are a service provider yourself, it is the overwhelming majority who are using MateSel within this room. So if we keep that in mind as we're going through the presentation, as I mentioned in the introduction, as sheep genetics clients, we have access to what we call the genetics toolkit. So that includes a sound breeding program design, a smart breeding program design, reports, genomics, the results, any information on sheep genetics, and MateSel is one of those tools. Now, with any good toolkit, you're going to have a wide variety of tools, but they're no use if you don't actually know how to use them and how to use them effectively. There's no point trying to use a hammer as a spanner. It's just not going to work. So what sheep genetics does is we offer what we call MateSel training. So we can either train new users to use MateSel effectively, as well as refresher courses for those who previously have had access. These workshops run and they cover aspects such as using MateSel in the breeding program, setting it up for success, a couple of demonstration runs to get you started, how you can use it within your own system, and then to retain access, you do have to pass an assessment to retain that login. What we use MateSel for is in a modern sheep genetics breeding program, and it's quite complex. There's a lot of balancing that we have to do within that situation. First up, we have to balance that between visual assessment and ASBVs on how we make those selection decisions. We can't just use one, we do need both, and how we balance between those two. We have opposing traits and how we balance between what traits are important in our breeding objective and might often be antagonistic to each other. And then as well, on top of all of that, we've also got that balance between genetic gain and driving that progress higher and higher, as well as managing and looking after our inbreeding and our co-ancestry. I'm sure we can all agree here that sometimes our best performers, more often than not, are more likely related to each other because they've got those good genetics on both sides of that pedigree. So how can we then maintain our diversity and our variation within our population, ensure that we're not heading too far down that inbreeding path? What MateSel does is allows us to combine all three of these balancing acts and can incorporate them into our selection decisions. So for those of you who answered no, I'm not using it, I challenge you to think, why not? Why aren't you using this tool that you have freely available to you in that toolkit? When it comes to selection, as part of a breeding modeling objective, we do have this great cohort available to us. We now have access to genetics from all across Australia and New Zealand and other parts of the world. We have access to more animals than we ever did previously before. As you saw yesterday, we've got higher genotyping in the Merino Select and Land Plan evaluations. We've got more animals coming in. We've seen substantial growth in the numbers of animals and data available at your fingertips. So what MateSel does, it will take the animals in the list that you provide, so you use in your RAMS lists. With a modern breeding design, we then include pedigree and trait recording. You get your ASBVs. That's sort of your selection process at the moment. You record an animal, you include the information, you get ASBVs, you choose the animals to select from. Now, where it can get a little bit confusing is with how do I choose the animals that are going to complement my breeding program? How do I choose the animals that are going to allow me to have that genetic gain while also maintaining that diversity, that balance that we saw in the previous slide? And that's where MateSel can come in. It can remove some of that confusion, some of those back and forth when it comes to making those selection decisions and making those selection decisions more often. However, MateSel can only take into account what it is given. So if we don't have pedigree, if we don't have trait recording, we can't account for that within our MateSel runs. One of the benefits of MateSel is you can have a look at co-ancestry. Now, co-ancestry is the measure of genetic diversity in a population. So, high co-ancestry means that there's not a lot of genetic diversity. They're all related to each other. Whereas low co-ancestry means there is a lot of diversity. You've got multiple sires contributing to that population's genetics. When it comes to uses for MateSel and how we're using MateSel as sheep genetics clients, it sort of falls into two categories. We've got allocation. We've got RAM A, RAM B, and I want them across these U's and I want them across those U's. And that's all well and good, but we are limiting what MateSel can do for us. Where MateSel is best used and best applied is when we allow it to perform what we call selection. We have an excess of RAMs, we have an excess of U's, and we can allocate and select based on the parameters that you set for it. This is how you get the best bang for buck when it comes to MateSel. Now, it's not just that, you can also use it in more creative ways. For example, selection of RAMs falls under that selection. If you're going to a sale and you've got access to a catalogue, if you've got your U-base, you can plug in some of those RAMs that you're interested in, run it through MateSel, see which ones it selects, and then you're going to the sale ready and raring with a list of an already short list of RAMs to use. You can use it for culling decisions. If you're trying to make some culling decisions on ewes, you could run them through MateSel, see which ones MateSel selects, and that can help contribute towards your culling decisions. You can use MateSel in more ways than just selection and allocation. You can use it in all different types of your breeding program design, which Marnie will go through in a second.
So I'm just going to run us through some quick trends since sheep genetics has enabled their breeders to use MateSel with their open license. So we've had really great uptake over the last 10 years from sheep genetics members in utilising MateSel with over 36 participants signed up in the last 10 months and 10 waiting for more training. So as we can see, since 2014, there's been a nice linear trend of the number of MateSel runs, which is really promising. However, in 2022, that has kind of teetered off a little bit. And we're wondering whether that's because people have been utilising MateSel for a little while, and so they're going straight into adding all of their parameters into their run rather than building it up from the baseline up, which is something that we recommend doing. And as we can see here, the number of runs per year, green being 1 to 4, dark green being 1 to 4 and light green being 10 plus, kind of proves that theory right, in the sense that we are having a few people with those smaller run numbers. Also bearing in mind that we do have quite a lot of service providers running quite a lot of MateSels. And as we can graph over the last 3 years as a month-by-month basis, we can see that, you know, your January, February, March, November, December months are getting really high utilisation of MateSel from breeders and service providers, sorry. However, it's really dropping off from, say, April to October. And as Chloe mentioned, MateSel is great in the fact that we can also utilise it to make our culling and ram purchases. So I suppose what we're trying to, the message that we're trying to get across this morning is, can we be utilising MateSel to its higher benefit? Can we be utilising it to a greater degree? Or are we currently potentially losing genetic progress? And we'll hear from Brian Kinghorn and Debbie soon with some real life applications of MateSel.
So I've got some 3 challenges for you in the audience today as some take homes. The first one is, are you using what is available freely to you in your genetics toolkit? If you answered no on the previous slide to not using MateSel, there is free training available. It is easily accessible for you. So I guess my challenge to you is, why not? Why not use a tool that is freely and accessible to you for your selection decisions? Of those who are either using it through a service provider or yourself, my challenge for you is, are you using MateSel to your advantage? Are you allowing it free reign to have a look at what you can achieve, and then are you allowing your parameters, or are you going in with all of your restrictions straight up? And then another challenge for you is, are you using MateSel to its full potential? Are you only using it for selection decisions, or are you using it for your culling, for your ram purchasing, for all aspects of your ram breeding program? So take a moment and have a think about those 3 challenges that I've set for you. And as we hear more from Brian and Debbie, you'll be able to see a little bit more as to what we're talking about with how we can use MateSel to our best advantage.
So our first question is around how MateSel deals with legacy flocks. So those are those flocks that are, dispersed or not actively supplying data to sheep genetics anymore. Would one of you two like to take that, or I might have a go at it? That's all right. So it does depend on what we know about the dispersed flock. If we have contact from the breeder to say, look, we've dispersed and we're not actively supplying data anymore, however happy for our animals that we've previously supplied to remain public, we are able to do so and keep their account as what we'd call legacy, and therefore anyone who buys any of those dispersed animals can use them in their MateSel runs. Unfortunately, we don't always hear when a flock does disperse, so if there is animals that you're trying to access in MateSel that you can't include in your runs, please get in touch with us and we'll have a look at what's going on with that flock. The next question is around how we can ensure that you have link rams used between years, as it generally pushes for younger rams.
Yes, absolutely. Within MateSel, you do have the ability to do individual parameters per ram. So if you do have a ram that you say have a certain number of AI doses, or for example, a link ram that you want more emphasis put on, you can specify that they have to use that ram a certain number of times, and that's one way you can do it. Another way you could do it is splitting off those link rams into a separate list and ensuring that they are used over a U base as well.
The next one we've got is how much pedigree is used in MateSel, which might be a bit of a targeted question because we've fixed a couple of things in there recently. Chloe, do you want to take it? Or?
Yeah. So we did identify an issue where it was only using 2 levels of pedigree. We've now increased that to 4, 5? Yeah, just a lot more levels. And we're continuing to develop and test how many higher levels of pedigree we can go before it affects how long it takes for those runs to be performed.
So I will just clarify on that, and I think there was another question in Slido when I was sitting to the side. The way that pedigree is used in MateSel is in the calculation of inbreeding. So the impact that it was having was just in that the outputs and, the calculations of inbreeding in those output files. And that was actually how the issue came to our attention, is we had flocks that were, having really low inbreeding results that we expected something much higher from those runs. So that has now been resolved and is fixed in MateSel. And we're now just pushing the boundaries to see how high we can go in terms of how much information we use in those calculations. We've got another one here. Can we please have more than 5 traits that we can add weighting to in our MateSel runs?
Yes, you're right. It is limited to 5 traits at the moment that you can add in addition to an index to build the frontier on. I'm not going to specify how many we can have. I'll leave that to Ryan to discuss. But when it comes to putting weight on your traits, I'd really encourage you to have a look and see which ones are important. See if by pushing one of those ones in your 5 list or more, you're not actually already doing the desired response. So for example, if you're increasing weight, that you're not already having a desired response in one of the other traits that you're interested in, so you don't actually have to specify that as a trait to increase. And you can do that through using the output mating file and the Shiny Tools app to see how your progeny are responding to each change that you made. And that relates back to the point that Marnie made about, are we going in straight away with our runs and doing that as is, or are we experimenting a little bit and pushing our traits a little bit at a time to see what we can achieve?
And the final question that we'll take here, which may actually be better addressed by Brian as well, but is around when will MateSel look at relatedness on a genomic relationship matrix rather than just pedigree? And I know that there's plenty happening in that space, and it is something that we do need to look at how we implement in the sheep industry and in the interface that we use at Sheep Genetics. So it's certainly something that's possible and will happen. It's just about sort of how we balance those resources in developing MateSel. So thank you, girls, for joining us up here. We'll now move on to our next presentation. So thank you, Colin and Marnie.